Students, Mr. Williams here, taking you through our judicial hierarchy, or as what we've called in the past, the Dorito of justice. Why? Well, it's a triangle, like a Dorito, so I'm trying to be cute, I guess. So what I'm going to do is kind of zoom in and out on several of the areas of this diagram. But essentially what we are going to discuss here is describing the structure and organization of our national judiciary, the judicial branch, the third branch of our national government. That same structure is mimicked by all of the states inside the United States of America, and for the most part, the other local governments as well. We begin by kind of reviewing jurisdiction. Jurisdiction, the official power to make legal decisions, literally after translated through its Latin roots, to say the law. Okay, so there are two different types of jurisdiction: original and appellate jurisdiction. Appellate, fancy term for appeal, challenging, asking for a review, re-examining. So original jurisdiction, you are the level of our judiciary that is first hearing the case and rendering a judgment. Appellate jurisdiction, you are reviewing a challenge to the constitutionality or legality of the situation in general, or you are reviewing the constitutionality or legality for which the law was applied, or for which the criminal justice system was executed, how all of the steps and procedures were carried out. Okay, so two different types of jurisdiction: original and appellate. At the bottom of our hierarchy, our organization, our Dorito, we have original jurisdiction. However, also at the top we have it. So the top court in our national government and the top court within our respective state governments possesses both original and appellate jurisdiction. The levels in the middle are district court of appeals, or our circuit court of appeals, or our appellate courts. There's a few different ways we refer to them here at the national level. Those appellate courts, those courts where you go to appeal the previous decision's constitutionality or the way at which it was applied, they only have appellate jurisdiction. They do not possess original jurisdiction. This becomes a bit clear, hopefully, after you sort through some of the additional information that's on this diagram, and as you sort through some of the Supreme Court cases that were part of that Google form activity that you needed to submit with this section. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just begin at the top here. All right, the Supreme Court of the United States of America, SCOTUS, S-C-O-T-U-S. You've seen us use LOTUS and POTUS. So just an acronym and abbreviation for this respective branch of government. There are 9 members to the Supreme Court, the highest judicial, highest interpretive body when it comes to a law or a policy being constitutional or legal, when it comes to the way that the law or policy was upheld, enforced, carried out, whether that is constitutional or legal. The Supreme Court, highest interpretive body in the land. Okay, so its decision in terms of whether something is or is not constitutional, is or is not lawful, all right, its decision is final. You cannot appeal to a higher legal body. There is also original jurisdiction held by the Supreme Court, and this would be in regards to matters that are of extreme significance, are extremely substantial, directly deal with the highest levels of our national government, or with individuals and our national government. 9 members to the Supreme Court. For logistics' sake, we have a Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices. The Chief Justice does not yield any additional power or any additional responsibility that separates the Chief Justice from the other associates in terms of, again, the overall job, scope, and scale of being a justice in the Supreme Court. Basically, you're first among equals, as it is said, when you're a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. For lack of a better term, you are the de facto face, the voice of the court. Somebody has to take point. Somebody has to be at the front of the line. That's effectively the Chief Justice. So it's more of a ceremonial position, okay, than it is one of where you get any additional control or final say of any kind, okay? There's some other bells and whistles that go with the Chief Justice position, but you are really, in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to rendering a judgment, first among equals, okay? Is there any set number? Does it have to be 9? No, it does not. It does not have to be 9. It could be larger. There have been threats by presidents in the past to appoint more justices to the court, but nevertheless, that always is directly related to the political climate at the time and whether or not the court leans a little bit more to being a court that favors precedent and the actual wording of the law, so judicial restraint or a conservative type of judiciary, or if it leans a little bit more to the left. It's a liberal judiciary, judicial activism, if you will, and tends to not necessarily focus so much on precedent or the exact interpretation, the exact wording of the law, a little bit more between the lines, okay? Now I'm going to bounce down here to the bottom. Before we go to the District Court of Appeals or our appellate courts or our Circuit Court of Appeals, let's talk about the United States District Courts, okay? This is the bottom of our federal court system, all right? The United States District Courts, also referred to as trial court. So for the most part, this is where you are going to go, and if you've broken a federal law, our United States District Attorneys, the United States of America, based off of where you would have committed this crime, you are going to be accused and tried in one of these district courts regarding whether or not you did or did not commit the crime against the federal government that you're being accused of committing. So there are 94 of these district courts across the land. Remember, the Constitution only establishes the Supreme Court. Congress then has the power to establish all inferior courts. So over time, as our nation's grown in size and population, there's been some reorganization. And we now have 94 districts out there. Here in the great state of Kansas, Kansas City, Topeka, and Wichita all possess district courts. Okay, they all possess a district courthouse where you can go and be tried for a crime you're being accused of committing against the United States government. They're going to hear roughly 300,000 cases a year. So across the 94 district courts, 300,000 cases per year are going to be heard. There are over 600 judges sitting in the district courts combined. Okay, 600 judges combined across the 94 districts. This is the level of our federal judiciary, our national judiciary, the judicial branch of our national government, where they execute original jurisdiction. So this is when somebody is tried for the first time. So this is the first level, the lowest level, and it is going to render the first judgment. It is going to say the law. It is going to interpret, okay, whether the law is just in this situation or again, how it's been applied as being just in regards to the crime that you're being accused of committing. Again, you have a trial, so this is where you're going to have a petit jury, a jury of your peers, sit and hear the situation. It's supposed to be impartial and unbiased, basically take in what's been said and say yes or no. You did or did not, beyond a shadow of a doubt, okay? Beyond a reasonable doubt. We believe that you did it, then you're guilty. Regardless of the verdict, the United States or the defendant can appeal, and you have to have a grounds for appeal. Again, we kind of talked about that in the previous subsections. If you have a grounds for appeal, like maybe the law isn't constitutional in this situation, maybe the law that you are being accused of breaking, you feel like you've got some type of battle that you can ensue that it is not legal, it's not lawful, or maybe the way that was applied, maybe the way that law enforcement carried out the application of and the execution of this law isn't constitutional or legal. If you got a grounds for appeal, you will appeal to one of the District Court of Appeals or one of the appellate courts. So we call those 94 districts All right. They have their own, I guess, they're part of their own circuit, all right, or larger district. There's 12 of those, 13 because there is a special federal circuit in D.C. So each of the 12 districts or regions or circuits in the United States of America has its own appellate court where 3 judges sit on that bench. They take in your appeal and they render the judgment. There's no jury here, okay? So they're basically ruling on the law itself being constitutional, right or wrong, in the situation that you're presenting, and or the way that the law was carried out and executed, whether it was constitutional, so whether it was applied, whether it was constitutional or lawful. So that's the District Court of Appeals. In the Trump administration, you've heard the Ninth Circuit, you've heard the Third Circuit, you've heard the Fifth Circuit, you've heard the Fifth, or again, we use district and circuit interchangeable here, and it can kind of make things confusing. But you've heard some of these, appellate courts referenced in regards to action that the Trump administration has taken or our United States government has taken over the last 4 years, okay? So that would mean a body of 3 judges in that circuit heard the case of this state versus the United States government in regards to the constitutionality of something. A big one that comes to mind would be the executive order that limited travel from certain Muslim concentrated nations to the United States of America. And ultimately, that was challenged by certain states. Certain states sued the United States government, i.e. Donald Trump, for something they felt was unconstitutional, that he didn't have that power to limit that movement. It was then appealed by Donald Trump, the United States government, the executive branch, after the district at which it was filed, a left-leaning, more liberal interpreting district, said, yeah, it's unconstitutional. Then appealed. It went to this one, in particular, the Ninth Circuit out on the West Coast. It was still upheld as being unconstitutional. Appealed again by Donald Trump and his administration to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ultimately said, no, it is constitutional. It's within the president's power. So that might be something that kind of, puts that light bulb off in your head in that situation. But that's kind of the general organization, all right, general organization of our federal court system, which is what the vast majority of the states also follow. Just over here, again, I have mentioned this already, the idea that the only court in the land that's established by the Constitution is the Supreme Court. All inferior courts decided upon by the United States Congress, and they're technically temporary. The Congress could reorganize and wipe out any of these districts at any point in time as they see fit. We've actually created, the 13th Circuit Court because a lot of these circuits were getting bogged down with items regarding patents, copyrights, trademarks, etc., and intellectual property. And we actually have that 13th Circuit now in D.C. that just focuses on kind of, again, those white-collar situations. Whereas maybe the 6th District Court or the 9th Circuit Appellate Court is focusing on, other laws that don't pertain to patents, copyrights, trademarks, etc. And we also, again, have a certain system established for like immigrations and customs. Those, again, were the special courts mentioned in 7.3 of the textbook from Pearson. Okay. Uphold a decision, modify a decision, overturn. I guess I probably should have built on that a little bit. Appellate courts, they're kind of handcuffed in ultimately what they can do. Because, again, we put a certain level of faith and trust in the idea that at the original jurisdiction level, the district court level, that justice is being provided, okay? So the appellate court is specifically charged with interpreting a very narrowly worded charge of how the law was not adequately applied at the district level, or it is itself unconstitutional. So again, a real specific portion of this, and this was kind of discussed in the Zoom meeting regarding Attorney General Derek Schmidt, Governor Lord Kelly, the executive order limiting attendance at churches, and Schmidt saying he wasn't going to encourage law enforcement to enforce that, and then the legislature, a small group of leaders, inside the state legislature, striking down a portion of that. Again, could go over that in a separate little screencast, but what I'm getting at is that was a great example of just one little specific thing was being challenged and being asked to be interpreted by the Supreme Court. Same thing with the appellate level here, okay? You're going to analyze the situation as presented to you, a very specific yes or no in terms of constitutional or unconstitutional, or correctly applied or not correctly applied. You're going to uphold it, you're going to modify it, or you're going to overturn it, okay? That's ultimately what the Court of Appeals is charged with, all righty? Getting back down here to the brass tacks of the state court system. For the most part, state courts, this is the vast majority of our American judiciary. So local courts and state courts. For the most part, 98% of judgments that are ruled or provided, appeals that are made, Supreme Court decisions held at the inferior state/local governmental level. Okay, so hundreds of thousands of courts exist within the state court system or municipality court system or county court system. Again, the organization mimics that of our national government and for the most part follows the same process. But that kind of does it in a nutshell. Bounced around a little bit, got a little long-winded, but that kind of does it in a nutshell here for, trying to zoom out here, our Dorito of justice. Let's see, yeah, there we go. All right. Feel free to print this out or save this on the computer. And if you got any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Boom, there we go. General organization and some procedural items regarding our national judiciary, the hierarchy, the organization, the movement of judgment, jurisdiction. Later.